He came back to Lagos a billionaire, riding in a car worth more than that entire hotel earned in a year. But the moment he stepped into room 1408 and turned around, the towel slipped from his hand and froze in the air. Because the woman bent over the bed, scrubbing the floor in a cleaner's uniform, was Adeze, the same woman who once sold her late mother's gold chain so that he could chase his dream across the ocean. The same woman he had searched for over 4 long years, and standing not far behind her was Madame Gozi, the floor supervisor who had spent that whole morning shouting at Adeze, calling her a useless village girl who would die holding a mop. That proud woman did not yet know who had just checked into her hotel. She did not know that the quiet man in room 1408 had just bought the very building she was standing in. By the time the truth came out, the people who had spent years humiliating a sick, struggling woman would not be able to lift their heads. If stories about loyalty, second chances, and the kind of love that survives time and silence touch your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where in the world you are watching from. Now sit back and let us begin. The morning Adeze Okonkwo's whole life turned over, she had already been awake since 4. That was nothing new. The buses from her one-room I Face You in Ajigunle did not wait for tired women, and Grand Cordova Hotel on Victoria Island did not forgive a cleaner who came late. So she rose in the dark the way she rose every day, washed her face with cold water from a plastic bucket, swallowed 2 of the cheap white tablets the chemist had sold her for her chest, and tied her uniform apron with hands that were already, even then, a little too slow. 87,000 naira a month. That was what they paid her to scrub the bathrooms of men who tipped their drivers more than that in a weekend. She had learned not to do the arithmetic of it. The arithmetic only made the chest pain worse. By 6:40 she was already on the 8th floor, pushing the heavy cleaning trolley down the long, carpeted corridor, the wheels making that small, tired squeak they always made. The whole floor smelled of air freshener and money. Adeze moved quietly. She had learned that, too. A good cleaner was a woman nobody noticed, a shadow that left the rooms cleaner than it found them and disappeared before anyone could remember her face. You, Okonkwo. She did not need to turn around to know whose voice that was. There was only one voice in the whole Grand Cordova that could make the back of her neck go cold like that. Madame Gozieze came down the corridor the way she always came, fast and sharp, her heels biting into the carpet, her ID card swinging on its lanyard, her mouth ready pulled tight before she had even reached you. She was the floor supervisor. She had been the floor supervisor for 11 years, and somewhere in those 11 years she had decided that the women who cleaned under her were not quite human, and she had never once gone back to check whether that was true. Madam. Adeze stopped the trolley. She kept her eyes down, the way you learned to. Room 806. The guest complained. He said the bathroom mirror had streaks. Ngozi folded her arms. Streaks. Do you know what streaks means, or should I bring a dictionary from my own pocket? I cleaned 806 myself, ma, yesterday evening. The mirror was, "Are you arguing with me?" Ngozi's voice climbed half an octave, and 2 guests stepping out of the lift down the hall slowed to watch. That was the thing about Ngozi. She liked an audience. She did her best cruelty in front of people. You stand there in that uniform that the hotel borrowed you, holding a rag that does not even belong to you, and you want to open your mouth and argue with me. No, ma. I'm sorry, ma. Sorry. Ngozi laughed, short and ugly. You people are always sorry after. You think because you can hold a mop, you have arrived in life? You think the day you wear this uniform you became somebody? Let me tell you something, my friend. A mop does not promote anybody. You will hold that mop until your hand bends, and you will still be exactly what you are. A small thing happened then that nobody saw. Adeze's chest tightened. Not the kind of tightness you get from anger, though she had plenty of that too, swallowed down with the white tablets every morning. This was the other kind, a slow, mean squeezing, low and to the left, like a fist closing around something that should never be touched. She breathed through her nose, the way the doctor at the General Hospital had told her to that one time, the time she had not been able to afford to go back. Go and do 806 again, Ngozi said. And if that guest complains one more time, I will personally write your name in the query book. Do you understand me? Yes, ma. Gatzi mimicked in a high, foolish voice that was nothing like Adeze's. Then she walked off, heels biting the carpet, satisfied, the way some people are only ever satisfied after they have made someone smaller. The 2 guests by the lift exchanged a look and went on their way. Nobody helped. Nobody ever helped. That was a thing Adeze had stopped expecting around the same time. She had stopped expecting the man she loved to walk back through her door. She pushed the trolley to 806. She cleaned the mirror that had no streaks. And she did not let herself cry, because crying made the chest pain worse, and she could not afford the chest pain, and she could not afford anything at all. There was a girl on the 8th floor, a younger cleaner named Blessing, barely 20, new to the city, who had started 3 months before and still flinched every time Madame Gauzy's heels came down the corridor. When the worst of the morning had passed, Blessing found Adeze in the linen room, sitting on an overturned crate, breathing slowly with one hand flat against her own chest. Auntie Ada. Blessing crouched beside her, worried. "You're not well, I can see it. You've not been well for weeks. Why don't you tell them? Why don't you go to the hospital?" Adeze opened her eyes and looked at the girl, this child who still believed that telling someone your trouble made the trouble smaller, and she did not have the heart to teach her otherwise. "I'm managing, my sister," she said. It was the great Nigerian sentence, the one that holds a whole life inside it. "I am managing. It's just the cold of the air conditioning. Help me fold these, eh? Then we'll do the 9th floor before Madam comes back to count our heads." Blessing folded sheets with her and chattered the way the young do, about a boy she liked and a dress she was saving for, and Adeze listened and made the right sounds, and underneath the listening she did the only arithmetic that ever truly mattered anymore. 87,000 naira a month. After the rent, after the transport, after the cheapest food a person could buy and still call it food, she could put aside, on a good month, maybe 11,000. 11,000 naira a month, toward a surgery that the kind doctor at the general hospital had told her, before she stopped being able to afford to go back, would cost something north of 4 million. She had done that arithmetic so many times that it no longer frightened her. It had passed all the way through fear and come out the other side into a flat acceptance. She was not going to save 4 million naira 11,000 at a time. She knew that the way she knew her own name. But you did not stop walking just because you knew the road had no end. You walked because walking was the only thing left that was yours. "Auntie," Blessing said, suddenly serious, "you carry yourself like a big woman, like you went to university. Sometimes I forget you're a cleaner like me. Were you something before?" Adeze smiled, and the smile had a long road behind it. "Everybody was something before, my dear," she said. "Now come. The 9th floor won't clean itself, and the rich don't like to wait." She cleaned the mirror that had no streaks, and she folded the sheets, and she did not let herself cry, because crying made the chest pain worse, and she could not afford the chest pain, and she could not afford anything at all. To understand how a trained accountant ended up scrubbing mirrors for a woman like Ngozi Eze, you have to go back 4 years to a smaller, poorer, far happier life in a town called Enugu, where the hills are green and a young woman once believed that love was enough to carry 2 people through anything. Back then, Adeze had a job, a real one with a desk and a swivel chair, and her name on a small plastic plate. A. Okonkwo, junior accounts officer. She worked at a mid-sized logistics firm off Zik Avenue, and she was good at it, fast with figures, the kind of careful that bosses trust. And in the evenings, when she closed from work, she would take the long way home, because the long way passed a certain block of cheap flats, and in one of those flats lived a young man named Chukwuemeka Nwankwo, who everybody called Emeka, and who Adeze loved the way you can only love when you are 24 and have not yet learned what the world does to softness. Emeka was a programmer, though in those days that word did not yet mean money in Nigeria the way it does now. He fixed people's laptops for most change. He wrote code at night that nobody paid him for, on a second-hand machine with a crack across the screen, and he talked about the future the way some men talk about God, with a kind of stubborn faith that did not need evidence. One day, he used to say, sitting on the floor of his one room because he could only afford one plastic chair, and he always gave it to her, "One day, Ada, I'm going to build something. Not for them. For us. For us," she would say back, and she meant it. When the scholarship came, it nearly broke them both, in 2 directions at once. It was a master's program in computer science at a university in England, and Emeka had applied for it the way you buy a lottery ticket, half as a joke, never telling her, never letting himself believe. And then the email came, on a Tuesday, and he ran the whole way from the cyber cafe to her office and stood outside the gate, breathing like a man who had seen a ghost, and when she came out he could not even speak. He just held up the printout with his hand shaking. She read it twice. Then she screamed and threw her arms around his neck, and the security man at her office gate thought somebody had died. But that night, in his one room, the joy went quiet. The way joy does when you sit down and start counting. The scholarship only covers the school fees, Emeka said. He was not looking at her. He was looking at the cracked screen of his laptop, where he had typed out the numbers, all of them, the flight, the visa, the first months of living before any allowance came through. I've checked everything, Ada. Everything. I don't have it. I'm short by almost 500,000. 487,000 naira. She would remember the exact figure for the rest of her life, the way you remember the exact weight of the thing you gave away. So we'll find it, she said. He laughed, but there was no laughter in it. Find it where? My salary is jokes. Your salary is jokes. Ada, this is not the kind of money people like us find. This is the kind of money people like us watch other people have. And here is the thing about Adaeze Okonkwo that Madame Ngozieze 4 years later would never bother to learn. When the people she loved were drowning, she did not stand on the bank and weep. She got in the water. She had savings, 312,000 naira, scraped together over 2 years of carrying her own lunch to work and walking when she could have taken a bus. It was supposed to be the start of her own life, a small piece of land in her village, a deposit on a future. She gave it to him without 1 second of hesitation, and when it was not enough, she did the thing she had sworn she would never do. Her mother had died when Adaeze was 19. The only thing she had left her was a gold chain, thin and old, and not worth very much to anyone in the world except the woman who wore it to church every Sunday until the cancer took her. Adaeze had kept it wrapped in a white handkerchief in a tin box for 5 years. She had promised herself she would be buried with it. She sold it for 175,000 naira to a dealer in Ogbeti market, who did not look up from his scale. And she walked out of that market with dry eyes, and she put the money in Emeka's hand that evening and said, "Now you have no excuse. Now you have to go and become the man you keep promising me," he cried. She did not. One of them had to be strong, and she had always understood that it would be her. Before he left, on a hot Saturday afternoon under the mango tree behind his block, Emeka knelt down in the red dust and brought out a ring. It was silver, not gold, a thin band he had bought with the last of his own money, and it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen because of the hand that held it. "I can't give you gold," he said. "I gave away my chance to give you gold. But I'm giving you my word, Ada. I'm coming back, and when I do, I'm marrying you, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to sell anything you love again. Get up before somebody sees you," she said, laughing and crying at once, and she let him put the silver ring on her finger. At the airport, they held each other until the very last call, and then they held each other a little longer, and then he was gone, walking backward through the gate so he could keep looking at her, until the crowd swallowed him, and she was standing alone in a terminal that suddenly felt like the inside of a drum. For the first 2 months, it was bearable. They spoke every day. He told her about the cold, the strange food, the lectures he could barely follow at first, and then could follow better than anyone. She told him about Enugu, about the small things, about how the rains had come early. They were poor and they were apart, and they were, in the way that only the young can be, completely happy. And then, in the 3rd month, the silence came. It did not come all at once. That is the thing people never understand about how 2 people lose each other. They imagine a clean break, a slammed door, a final word. The truth is messier and crueler than that. The truth is that it was a chain of small ordinary disasters, each one survivable on its own, that happened to fall on top of each other at exactly the wrong time. The first link in the chain was a thief on a train. Emeka was traveling from his university town into the city for a weekend job, a small coding gig that would put a little money in his pocket, and somewhere between one station and the next, in the press of bodies, a hand went into his coat, and his phone was gone. Just like that. Everything in it gone with it. Her number, her photographs, the voice notes he had saved, all of it riding away in some stranger's pocket. In those days, he had not yet learned to save anything to the cloud. The phone was the only place her number lived. He was not worried, not at first. He knew her number, didn't he? He had typed it 1,000 times, except that he had not typed it. He had pressed her name. And now there was no name to press, and when he sat down to write the number from memory, he found, to his horror, that he could get the first 6 digits, and then the rest dissolved into fog. He tried combinations. He called 4 wrong people. He told himself it was fine, he would write to her, he had her address. That was the second link, because back in Enugu, at almost exactly the same time, Adese's whole world was quietly falling apart in a way she had not told him about, because she had not wanted to worry him because he was far away and he had enough to carry. The logistics firm where she worked had been bleeding for months. The owner had been borrowing to pay salaries, and one grey Monday they called the whole Jew staff into the canteen, and a man in a tight suit told them, in the bloodless language that men in tight suits use, that the company was winding down operations and their services would no longer be required. They gave her a severance, 41,000 naira and a handshake. For 3 years of careful, faithful work. She did the arithmetic that night, sitting on her bed, and the arithmetic was merciless. Her rent was due. She had given her savings to Emeka, all of it, the land money and the chain money and everything. If she paid the rent, she would have nothing to eat while she looked for another job. If she ate, she could not pay the rent. There was no third door, so she chose the door that let her keep breathing. She packed her things, which were not many, into 2 Ghana must-go bags and a cardboard box, and she moved out of the flat she had shared a wall with Emeka's memory in, and she went to a smaller, cheaper room in a rougher part of town, one room behind a welder's shop, where the noise started at 6 and ended at 9. And here is the cruelty of it. The small human cruelty that the storytellers always leave out because it does not sound dramatic enough. She did not leave a forwarding address, not because she was careless, because she was ashamed. She was a girl who had given everything to send a man to England, and now she could not even keep a roof over her own head, and she could not bear for the neighbors to watch her carry her bags out in daylight. So she paid the gateman a little something to say nothing, and she left in the early morning, and she told herself she would write to Emeka with her new address as soon as she was settled. As soon as she had a job. As soon as she had something that was not shame to put in the letter. She never got the chance to send that letter. And the letter Emeka eventually sent never found her. That was the third link, and it had a name, and the name was Tochukwu. Tochi was Emeka's closest friend from the program, a loud, good-hearted, hopelessly disorganized boy from Owerri, who was finishing a few months ahead and flying home to Nigeria. Emeka, half mad with worry by then, having tried everything, wrote Adeyeze a letter, a long one, pouring out everything. The stolen phone, the lost number, his address in England, begging her to write back the moment she received it. He sealed it, he gave it to Tochi. He made him swear on his mother's life to deliver it into Adeyeze's own hand. Tochi swore. Tochi meant it, and Tochi, being Tochi, put the letter in the side pocket of a traveling bag, flew to Lagos, got swept up in the chaos of a returning son, spent 3 weeks being feted by relatives, and by the time he finally remembered the letter and made the trip to Enugu to find Adeyeze, the flat was occupied by a young couple who had never heard of any Adeyeze Okonkwo, and the gateman who might have known something had himself moved on. Tochi stood outside that gate with the letter in his hand and a sick feeling in his stomach, and then he did the thing that ordinary, well-meaning, weak people do. He told himself he would keep looking. And then life happened to him, the way it happens to everyone. And the looking got thinner and thinner. And the letter stayed in the side pocket of that bag for a long time. And a young woman in a one room behind a welder's shop in another part of the country waited for a word that was sitting, forgotten, less than 200 kilometers away. The fourth link was the smallest and the meanest. To save money, Adeyeze gave up her old line, the one Emeka knew, the one with the airtime she could no longer afford, and took a cheaper SIM. The old number went dead, and so when Emeka, months later, finally remembered the 7th and 8th digits and dialed in a fever of hope, a recorded voice told him, in flat English, that the number he had dialed was not available. That was how 2 people who would have crossed an ocean for each other came to lose one another inside the same country. Not through betrayal, not through any failure of love. Through a thief, a sacking, a forgotten letter, and a cheaper SIM card. 4 ordinary things, any one of them survivable. All 4 together, fatal. Emeka finished his master's at the top of his class with a hole in his chest where she used to be. He got a job. He was good at it, and then he was better than good, and in the evenings, the way he had always done, he built things nobody had asked him to build. He and Tochi and 2 others started something small, a piece of software for moving money across borders cheaply, the kind of thing that solves a problem millions of people have and do not know can be solved. It was small. Then it was not small. Then, after a little over 2 years of 18-hour days, a much larger company in California offered them an amount of money to buy it that, The first time Emeka saw the figure written down, he had to sit on the floor of his apartment for a while and just breathe. He was a wealthy man at 29. By 31, after the right investments and the right rooms, he was something past wealthy that he did not like to say out loud. And the entire time, in the quiet hours, when the work was done and the city was asleep, the same thought sat in him like a stone at the bottom of a well. I never found her. I have everything I promised her, and I never found her, and I do not even know if she is alive. He went home to find out. He told himself it was business. He was buying assets in Lagos real estate, a stake in a struggling hospitality group that owned, among other things, a 5-star hotel on Victoria Island called the Grand Cordova. The lawyers needed him in the country. That was the official reason. But the real reason, the one he did not write in any email, was a thin silver ring that he still carried in the inside pocket of every jacket he owned, and a promise he had made under a mango tree to a woman he had failed, through no fault of his own, in every way except the one that mattered. He had never once stopped loving her. His flight landed at Murtala Mohammed at 11:15 at night. His assistant had booked him into the eco, but there had been some confusion, a system error, a double booking, and rather than make noise about it at midnight, Emeka had simply said, "Find me anything decent and quiet," and the driver had taken him to a hotel the company was in the middle of acquiring anyway, a hotel he half-owned by then and had never set foot in. The Grand Cordova. He checked into room 1408 a little after 1 in the morning, too tired to notice the gold lettering or the marble or the careful smell of money. He slept the dead sleep of a man who has crossed an ocean, and in the morning, while a cleaner he could not yet see was being humiliated in a corridor 2 floors below over a mirror that had no streaks, Emeka Nwankwo stood under the shower of room 1408 with no idea that the longest search of his life was about to end before breakfast. It was a few minutes past 9 when Adeze knocked on the door of 1408. She had cleaned 40 rooms that week without incident, and she wanted 41. Her chest had been bad all morning. The argument with Ngozi had set it off, and it had not fully settled, that low, mean fist still half-closed under her ribs, and all she wanted was to finish the floor, sit down for 10 minutes in the linen room, and breathe. Housekeeping, she called, her voice flat with tiredness. There was the sound of water running inside, a shower. No answer. She waited, knocked again, called again, and when the running water gave no objection, she let herself in with her MasterCard the way the rules allowed. The room was a standard checkout and clean. A jacket over the chair, expensive, the kind of cloth that does not crease. A single travel bag, barely unpacked. A man who had clearly arrived late and tired. She did not look at any of it too closely. Looking closely was not her job. Her job was the bed, the surfaces, the bathroom once the guest was done. She set down her caddy, snapped the soiled sheet off the bed with 2 practiced shakes, and bent to scrub a small ring of something off the floor by the desk. The shower stopped. She did not turn around. A good cleaner did not turn around. She kept her eyes on her work and waited for the guest to call out, to ask her to come back later, to do the small dance of strangers, sharing a room they did not want to share. The bathroom door opened. She heard him step out, heard the soft sound of a towel, and then she heard nothing at all. It was the quality of the silence that finally made her look up. It was not the ordinary silence of a guest waiting for the cleaner to leave. It was a held silence, a stopped silence, the silence of a person who has seen something that has reached into their chest and turned off the world. She turned. He was standing by the bathroom door with a white towel in one hand, halfway to his head, and the hand had stopped moving, and the towel hung in the air, and he was staring at her the way you stare at a person who has come back from the dead. He was older, heavier in the shoulders. He wore his hair differently, and there was money on him now. You could see it in the stillness of him, in the way he stood. But the eyes were the same eyes. They were the exact eyes that had wept under a mango tree and sworn to come back. The cloth fell out of her hand. "Ada," he said, just that. Her name, the way only one person in the whole world had ever said it. The room tilted. She felt the fist under her ribs open all the way, felt the cold rush up her arm and into her jaw, and she had one clear thought, absurd and complete, before everything went white. Not now, not when he is finally here, not now. Ada, her knees were already going. She saw him drop the towel and lunge across the room, saw his arms come out, and then the white took everything and she fell into a darkness that smelled, faintly and impossibly, of him. "Somebody help! Somebody please!" Emeka caught her before she hit the floor, went down to his knees with her weight in his arms, and the shout that came out of him was a sound he had never made before. Staff came running. A bellman, a supervisor, a guest from the next rooms. Somebody said she had fainted. Somebody said to call the front desk. And Emeka, holding her, feeling how light she was, how the bones of her shoulder pressed up through skin that had not been that thin 4 years ago, heard himself saying her name over and over, like a man trying to call someone back from a long way off. Ada, please. Open your eyes, please. She did not. He did not wait for the hotel's ambulance, did not wait for forms or for permission. He lifted her, this woman he had crossed an ocean and 4 years to find, and he carried her out of room 1408 and into the lift and through a lobby full of staring faces. And he put her in the back of the car worth more than the hotel earned in a year, and he told the driver to find the nearest good hospital and to break every law that needed breaking to get there fast. And as the city blurred past the window, the same prayer turned over and over in him, the prayer of a man who has finally found the thing he lost, only to watch it slip again. Not like this. Lord, I have only just found her. Do not take her like this. Reef Hospital on Adeolo Odeku took her in within 4 minutes of the car, screaming to a stop at the emergency doors. Emeka stood in the corridor and watched them wheel her away behind doors he was not allowed through, and then there was nothing for him to do but the thing the wealthy are worst at. Wait, powerless, with all his money useless in his pocket. He could not sit, he walked. He walked the length of the corridor and back, the length and back, past the rows of plastic chairs, and the woman selling sachet water and the old man asleep, with his cap over his face. His mind was a storm. The woman he had built an empire to one day deserve was lying behind those doors in a cleaner's uniform, thin as a reed, fainting on a hotel room floor, and he did not understand any of it. What had happened to her? The accountant, the careful one, the one who had a desk and a future and a gold chain from her mother. How had the world done this to her while he was gone? And under that, lower and uglier, a question he was ashamed of, even as it formed. How had he let it? A doctor came out, a woman, maybe 50, with tired, kind eyes and a name tag that read Dr. Ifeoma Adeyemi. Emeka was across the corridor before she had finished pulling off her gloves. Doctor, how is she, please? Dr. Ifeoma looked at him, took his measure the way good doctors do, and decided to give him the truth. She's stable. She's conscious. The faint was brought on by a cardiac event, not a severe one this time, but it was a warning. This time. Sir, the doctor paused. Are you family? I'm. And what was he? 4 years too late, a ring in his pocket. I'm the person who's going to pay for whatever she needs, he said. And I'm the person who's not leaving. Whatever else I am, we can sort out later. Something in the way he said it made the doctor nod. She lowered her voice. Then you should know. This is not new. The scarring we're seeing on the heart, the thickening, this has been building for a long time. Her blood pressure has been dangerously high, untreated for what looks like years. There's a valve problem that has gotten worse because nobody caught it early. In a woman her age, this should never have reached this point. Why didn't she? Because catching it early costs money she clearly didn't have, the doctor said. Not unkindly, but plainly, because she had seen this 100 times, and the plainness was its own kind of respect. Hypertension is quiet. It doesn't hurt, not at first. So people who can't afford to go looking for what isn't hurting them simply don't go. And it sits there quiet, doing damage, until one day it isn't quiet anymore. She needs surgery, a valve repair, and she needs it soon. Then do it, whatever it costs. It's not a today thing. There are tests, preparation, her body has to be ready. But the cost, the doctor named a figure, a little over 4 million naira, and watched his face the way she had learned to watch faces when she named that figure. Because that figure was where most of these stories ended, with a relative looking at the floor and saying they would try to raise it, and everyone in the corridor knowing they would not. Emeka did not look at the floor. Prepare everything, he said. Start whatever needs starting. The money will be there before you finish the sentence. The doctor blinked. Then, because she had been doing this long enough to know the real thing when she finally saw it, she said, She's asking for water and trying to get up and discharge herself. You should go in. Maybe you can do what none of my nurses can and make her lie still. He went in. Adeyeze was half sitting in the narrow bed, an IV taped to the back of one thin hand, arguing weakly with a nurse about whether she could go to work. When the door opened and she saw who it was, she stopped arguing. The nurse, sensing whether she did not want to be standing in, found a reason to leave. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. He stood at the foot of the bed. She looked at him as if he might dissolve, as if 4 years of wanting had finally cracked her mind and conjured him out of pure need. "You're real," she said at last. "A test." He came around the bed and sat in the chair beside her, slowly, the way you approach something you are afraid to startle, and he took her hand, the one without the needle, and he held it in both of his. "I'm real." She looked down at his hands holding hers, then she reached up with the slow wonder of a blind woman and touched his face, his jaw, the corner of his mouth, as if reading him. "Where were you?" she whispered. There was no accusation in it. Only 4 years of a question. "I'm going to tell you everything," he said. "All of it. I swear to you, Ada, every day. But not now. Not while you're like this. The doctor says your heart. I know about my heart." She let her hand fall back to the blanket. "I've known for a long time. Why do you think I'm cleaning rooms?" A small, broken laugh. "I needed the money for the surgery. 87,000 a month. I did the arithmetic. At that rate, I would have saved enough in about 19 years. Another laugh, worse than the first. "I was going to be the healthiest corpse in Ajagunle." He did not laugh. He could not. He looked at her thin hands and her grey-tinged face and the cracked plastic of the bed rail, and he made a decision in that chair that he would never go back on, not for the rest of his life. "You're not cleaning any more rooms," he said. "Not one. Your only job from today is to lie in that bed and get well, and let me carry the rest." "You carried me, Ada. For 4 years you've been carrying both of us, and you didn't even know I was still alive to be carried. Now it's my turn. Let me." She closed her eyes. A tear went down the side of her face into the pillow. "Okay," she said. "Okay." It was the first time in 4 years that Adeyeze Okonkwo had let anybody else hold the weight, and the relief of it, more than any drug in the IV, was what finally let her sleep. The surgery was set for the end of that week. Dr. Ifeoma wanted 4 days of monitoring and medication first, to bring the blood pressure down and stabilize her heart before they opened it. And Emeka spent those 4 days doing 2 things at once. The first thing was simple. He moved into the chair beside her bed and barely left it. He learned the names of all her nurses. He brought food she would actually eat, light soups, fresh fruit, the small chin-chin she had loved in Enugu that he hunted down in a Lagos market, by describing it badly to 4 confused traders until the 5th one understood. He sat with her in the long, quiet afternoons, and they did not always talk. Sometimes they just existed in the same room, 2 people relearning the simple animal comfort of being near each other, a thing they had been starved of for 4 years. On the 2nd afternoon, she caught him watching her while she ate, with an expression on his face she could not read. "What?" she said, around a mouthful of soup. "Why are you looking at me like that?" "You eat differently now," he said quietly. "In Enugu you used to talk through the whole meal. You couldn't shut up. I used to beg you to chew. Now you eat like somebody who learned that food can finish before you're ready." He stopped. "I keep finding these small things the years did to you. Things I can't fix with money, and it's making me ask myself questions I don't like the answers to." She set the spoon down. "Like what?" "Like where I was. The exact day you sat in the canteen and a man in a suit told you the company was finished. I keep trying to remember what I was doing that day, whether I was laughing somewhere, whether I bought myself something nice while you were carrying your whole life out of that flat in 2 bags before sunrise." His jaw worked. "I have so much money now, Ada, and there's no amount of it that can go back to that morning and carry your bags for you." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached over and took his hand, and it was strange and right, her comforting him from a hospital bed. "Listen to me," she said. "If you had carried my bags that morning, you would have stayed. And if you had stayed, you would not be the man who could pay for this bed I'm lying in, or this surgery that is going to let me live to be an old woman, shouting at you. You think I would trade these 4 years of pain for that? I would do them again, every day of them. Because they were the price of you becoming you." She squeezed his hand. "Stop grieving a past you couldn't have changed. It's a rich man's luxury, that kind of grieving. Spend the money on me instead. I'd rather have the chin-chin." He laughed, the sound coming out of him cracked and grateful, and he wiped his eyes with the back of his wrist, and he went and bought her so much chin-chin the nurses complained. On the 3rd night, when the ward was dark and the monitors made their small green sounds, she could not sleep, and neither could he, and they talked in low voices the way you can only talk in the dark. "Were there others?" she asked. "In 4 years, in England?" "I'd understand if there were. I'm not asking to fight. I just want to know the shape of the years I missed." He did not answer too quickly, because answering too quickly is the answer of a man who has practiced a lie. He took his time. There was one, he said finally. A girl from the program. Kind, clever. She liked me, and I let her for a while because I was lonely and you were a number I couldn't dial, and I thought maybe I was supposed to move on like a sensible person. He turned his head on the dark pillow. It lasted 4 months. And then one night, she said something a little unkind about somebody serving us in a restaurant. A small thing, a waiter, nothing really. And I watched myself go cold, and I realized I was sitting across from somebody who would never have sold her mother's chain for anybody. And I couldn't do it. I told her the truth, that my heart was occupied by a ghost, and she called me a fool, and she was right, and I never tried again. A pause. That's the shape of the years, Ada. I tried once to stop loving you, and I failed at it inside 4 months. There was no one after that. There was just work, and the silver ring, and a flight home I kept not booking because I was afraid of what I'd find. In the dark, she found his hand again, and held it, and neither of them said anything else. And it was the best night's sleep she had had in 4 years. The second thing Emeka did in those 4 days was finish, with a speed that made his lawyers nervous, 2 pieces of business he had set in motion months before from across the ocean. The first was a house. He had been negotiating, through agents, for a furnished property in Ikoyi, in one of those quiet streets where the houses sit far back behind their walls, and the air itself seems more expensive. On the second day of Adese's monitoring, he completed the payment and took the keys, and he did not tell her, because he wanted her to see it, not be told about it. The second piece of business was the Grand Cordova itself. The hospitality group his firm had been acquiring owned the hotel, and the acquisition had been 90% done before he ever landed. In those 4 days, sitting in a hospital chair with a laptop on his knees while the woman he loved slept, Emeka closed the last 10%. By the Thursday, on paper, in every way that mattered, the Grand Cordova Hotel belonged to him. The same hotel where, 2 floors below room 1408, a supervisor named Gozi Eze was at that very moment shouting at another cleaner about another mirror, with no idea at all that the ground had shifted under her feet. He did not act on it, not yet. He filed it away, cold and patient. There would be a time. On Friday, they took Adeze into theater. Emeka stood at the doors as far as they would let him go, and he watched the bed roll away from him for the second time in a week, and he made himself the same promise he had made in the car. Then he went and sat in the chair, and he did not move for 5 hours, and when Dr. Efioma finally came out, still in her scrubs, pulling down her mask, and saw his face, she smiled before she even spoke, to save him the extra second of agony. "It went well," she said. "Better than well. The valve held the repair beautifully. She's strong, Eurydace. Stronger than her heart had any right to make her." She put a hand briefly on his shoulder, a thing she did not do for everyone. "She's going to be all right. She's going to have years." Emeka Nwankwo, billionaire, sat down in a plastic hospital chair and put his face in his hands and wept like a boy, and the cleaner mopping the corridor pretended not to see, the way the kind ones do. Adeze healed quickly, the way people do when the thing that was eating them turns out to be fixable, and somebody finally fixes it. Within a few days, she was sitting up, then walking the corridor on an Emeka's arm, then complaining about the hospital food, which Dr. Ifioma said was the surest sign of recovery she knew. On the day they discharged her, Emeka brought clothes for her, soft, simple, expensive, without shouting about it, and when she came out of the bathroom for undressed in them, she stopped and looked at herself in the mirror for a long moment, a woman recognizing and not recognizing herself at once. "Where are we going?" she asked in the car, because the car had turned away from every part of Lagos she knew. "I told you I got a small place while you were in hospital," he said, eyes on the road, fighting a smile. "Emeka." She looked at the streets sliding past, the walls getting higher, the gates getting grander, the very quality of the silence outside the window changing. "What did you do?" The car slowed at a gate that opened before they reached it, the way gates open for people the world has decided to make things easy for, and rolled up a drive to a house that was not a small place by any definition in any language, white and broad and quiet, with windows like still water. She did not say anything. She had no words ready for this. He came around and opened her door and helped her out, and she walked into that house on his arm the way you walk into a dream you are afraid of waking from. The cool of the air conditioning, the hush of thick rugs, a staircase that curved. She stood in the middle of a sitting room bigger than the whole compound she had grown up in, and she put one hand over her mouth, and Emeka watched her face do the thing he had crossed an ocean to make it do. "This is yours," he said quietly. Whatever happens between us, however you feel, this house is in your name. I had the papers drawn up. You will never again be one bad month away from sleeping behind a welder's shop. That's done. That's over. She turned to him with her eyes full. I don't understand any of this, she said. I don't understand how you're standing here. I don't understand the car, the house. She gestured helplessly at all of it. 4 years, Emeka. 4 years I waited for a phone call, and now you walk back into my life and you're… She could not even say the word. How? How did this happen? What happened to you? He took her hand and led her to a sofa, and they sat, and he told her. He told her about the train and the thief and the phone with her name in it. He told her about the 6 digits he could remember and the 4 he could not. He told her about the wrong numbers he had called, the strangers in Enugu he had begged for help, the letter he had poured his heart into and given to Tochi with both their futures in it. And when he got to the part about Tochi and the letter that sat forgotten in a side pocket while she waited 200 kilometers away, Adeze made a small sound, because she understood finally that he had not abandoned her, that there had never been a moment when he chose to let her go. I had a letter, she said. There was a letter, and it never came. All these years, I thought. She stopped. I thought you got there, and you saw what life could be over there, and you decided I was the past. Ada. He held her face in both hands. I built a company so I would have the money to come and look for you properly. The whole thing. Everything. There was no minute, not one, that I wasn't looking for the way back to you. And then she told him her own story, the parts he did not know, the sacking, the 41,000 naira severance and the merciless arithmetic, the shame that made her move out in the early morning without leaving an address, the gold chain, which he already knew about, and the years of looking for work that never came, the doors that closed, the slow slide from accountant to anything to nothing, until the only door left open in the whole city was a cleaner's job at the Grand Cordova for 87,000 a month. And even that came with a woman named Gozi, who made her pay for it in dignity every single day. When she said the name Gozi and described the woman and the mirror with no streaks and 11 years of small daily cruelties to women whose only crime was being poor and within reach, Emeka went very still. The supervisor, he said, on the 8th floor of the Grand Cordova. Forget her. Adeze waved a tired hand. She's not worth your face changing like that. People like that, they're just… Tell me her full name. Ngozi Eze. Adeze frowned at him. Emeka, what is it? Why are you looking like that? He did not answer right away. He was thinking. He was thinking about a hotel that belonged to him now, on paper, in every way that mattered, and a woman in it who had spent that very morning, and 11 years of mornings, teaching frightened poor women that a mop does not promote anybody. He was thinking that there are some debts that are not about money. Nothing, he said, and he smiled, and the smile did not reach all the way to his eyes. Eat something, then your medicine. We'll talk about the rest tomorrow. 3 weeks later, Adeze was strong enough to stand for an hour without tiring, and Emeka told her he wanted to take her somewhere, and that she should dress well, and that was all he would say. She had no idea where they were going until the car pulled up outside the Grand Cordova. Emeka. She actually reached for his arm. Why are we here? I can't go in there. They'll see me, Ngozi will. Trust me, he said. Just this once, walk in there with your head up, and trust me. Whatever happens, stand next to me and don't say a word, and let it happen. There was something in his voice she had not heard before, something cold and certain and patient, and she did not understand it. But she had decided in that hospital bed to let this man carry the weight. And so she straightened her back, and she took his arm, and she walked into the lobby of the Grand Cordova Hotel, as a guest, in good clothes. On the arm of a man, the staff were falling over themselves to welcome. There was, it turned out, a meeting. The general manager had been told that the hotel's new ownership would be visiting for the first time, and had assembled the senior staff in the main banqueting hall to make a good impression. 40-odd people in pressed uniforms stood in nervous rows. And in the second row, near the front where supervisors stood, was Madame Ngozi Eze, chin up, ID badge gleaming, wearing the particular look of a woman who has survived 11 years of management changes and intends to survive one more. She saw Adeze first, of course she did. Her eyes found the cleaner she had screamed at 3 weeks ago, now standing in the doorway in clothes that cost more than Ngozi's salary, and her face curdled into pure contempt. What is this? Ngozi said, loudly, because she always did her best cruelty loudly. She stepped out of her row, pointing. Why is this one here, Okonkwo? You were sacked the day you ran off and abandoned your floor. How dare you come back into this hotel dressed like a thief who robbed a real madam, walking in here as if you are somebody. Security. Get this dirty, Mademoiselles. The general manager's voice cracked across the hall like a whip white with horror. Be quiet now. But Ngozi, 11 years deep in the certainty that the poor were beneath her and would always be beneath her, did not hear the fear in his voice. No, sir, I will not be quiet. I know this girl. She is a cleaner. A common cleaner who abandoned her duties. She has no business standing here among professionals, and she certainly has no business standing next to a guest. People like her need to be reminded what their level is before they. That's enough. It was not loud. That was the thing about it. After all of Ngozi's shouting, the two words that stopped the entire room were spoken quietly by the man standing next to the cleaner, and the quiet of them was somehow more total than any shout could have been. Emeka stepped forward, one pace, so that the whole hall could see him. For those who haven't been introduced, he said in that same low, even voice, my name is Chukwuemeka Nwankwo. As of last Thursday, I owned the company that owns this hotel, which means, Madam Eze, that I own the floor you are standing on, the badge around your neck, and the 11 years of authority you have just been using in front of 40 witnesses to abuse a woman in my care. The silence in the banqueting hall was a physical thing. You could have heard a pin drop into a glass of water. Ngozi's mouth was open. The contempt was draining out of her face, and something grey was coming up underneath it. Sir, I didn't. There's been a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. Emeka reached into his jacket, and what he brought out was not the silver ring. That was for later, that was for a days, but a slim folder, and he opened it. While I was acquiring this hotel, I asked for the records of the housekeeping department. 3 weeks ago, you wrote up Adaeze Okonkwo for a guest complaint in room 806, a streaked mirror. The same morning, you also logged a missing item from a guest in room 8111, a watch. You filed it as suspected staff theft, and you put her name down as the cleaner with access. He turned a page. The thing is, room 8111's keycard log shows that Adaeze Okonkwo never entered that room. Not that day, not that week. Her card opened 802 through 808. The only staff card that opened 8111 that morning at 7:52, 14 minutes before you filed the report, was yours. A sound went through the assembled staff, a low collective intake of breath. Heads turned toward Ngozi. Ngozi had gone the color of ash. I'm not going to stand here and accuse you of what those records, Emeka said. That's a matter for the police and for a proper investigation, and there will be one, and it will be by the book, because that is how it should be done. Not by me deciding your fate in a banqueting hall, which would make me no better than you. But what I can do today, lawfully and on the record, is this. Madam Eze, your employment is terminated, effective immediately for gross misconduct, with the documentation to support it. You will be escorted to collect your belongings. Whatever you are owed under your contract, you will receive, to the Kobo, because we follow the law in this building, even with people who didn't. He let that sit for a moment. Then he looked, slowly, at the 40 frightened faces in their pressed uniforms, and his voice changed, and the cold went out of it. There was movement at the back of the hall. Ngozi, who had stood frozen through all of it, suddenly found her voice again, and what came out of her was not contrition. It was the oldest reflex of a certain kind of person, the reflex to attack the weaker target. She told you lies, Ngozi said, her voice climbing, pointing a shaking finger at Adaeze. This girl. She lay in your bed in some hospital, and she filled your ears with lies about me to get herself a rich man and revenge. Sir, you don't know her. You don't know what these cleaners are like. They will say anything they will. Madam Eze. Adaeze spoke for the first time, and the whole room turned, because the cleaner they had all watched being abused that morning had a voice ice, after all, low and steady and entirely without fear. I never told him your name to hurt you. I told him to forget you. I said you weren't worth it. She took a breath. Do you remember what you said to me 3 weeks ago? You said a mop does not promote anybody. You said I would hold that mop until my hand bends. You said it in front of 2 guests, and you laughed. Adaze's chin lifted. You were wrong about almost everything, but you were right about one thing. The mop didn't promote me. Nothing in this building promoted me. The only thing that ever lifted me was being the kind of person who didn't become you, even when life gave me every reason to. That's the only promotion that was ever real. The silence that followed was not the silence of a room waiting for more. It was the silence of a room that has heard everything it needed to hear. Ngozi opened her mouth, and closed it, and for the first time in 11 years found that there was nothing in her arsenal that worked. No insult sharp enough, no audience on her side, no power left in the badge around her neck. 2 security men stepped up on either side of her, not roughly, because Emeka had been clear that everything in this building was done by the law now, even this. She was walked out of the banqueting hall through a corridor of the very people she had spent a decade making small, and not one of them said a cruel word to her going, which was, in the end, the loudest verdict of all. Then Emeka looked at the 40 faces again, and the cold went out of his voice. "And to the rest of you," he said, "every cleaner, every porter, every person in this room who has spent years being told that a uniform makes you nobody, hear me. The woman standing beside me cleaned the rooms of this hotel for 87,000 naira a month. She fainted from a heart she couldn't afford to fix, and she still came to work, and she was still good at her job, and she was still spoken to like dirt by a person whose whole authority, I have just discovered, was built on lies." He paused. "I am not going to run a hotel like that. Not one I own. From today, the people who clean these rooms are the reason this hotel has a name, and they will be paid and treated and protected like it. There will be a review of every salary in this department starting Monday, and the next person who tells someone in this building that a mop does not promote anybody will find out, very fast, that in my hotels it absolutely does." Somebody, somewhere in the back rows, began to clap. And then it spread, the way relief spreads, the way years of swallowed grievance comes out when a door finally opens, until the whole banqueting hall of porters and cleaners and waiters was applauding, some of them with tears running down their faces, while a former floor supervisor stood alone in the middle of it all, finally, completely and permanently reminded of her level. A Daisy watched it from beside him, and she did not clap because she could not. She was too busy looking at the man she had sold her mother's chain for and understanding, fully for the first time, exactly who he had become with the chance she gave him, not just rich. That was the small part. He had become a man who used the chance to lift other people up the same ladder he had climbed. They did not stay long after that. There was no need. The point was not to gloat. The point had been justice, and justice, once done, does not require an audience. The recovery, after that day, became something else. It became a life. Emeka was not idle in those weeks, and neither, soon, was Adeze. He was setting up a new company, the next thing, and most mornings he was on calls before she woke, the rhythm of a man who builds things for a living. But he made room every single day the way he had sworn to in the hospital chair. He took her to her checkups himself and sat in the waiting room with the other anxious people, a billionaire reading a battered magazine. He learned which of her tablets went with food and which went on an empty stomach, and he set the alarms on his own phone so she would never have to remember. And one evening, sitting in the big quiet sitting room with the television murmuring, Adeze turned to him and said the thing she had been turning over for days. "I don't want to just be carried," she said. He muted the television. "Tell me, you keep saying we, the company, the future, all of it. We. And I love that you mean it." She chose her words carefully the way the careful do. "But I'm an accountant, Emeka, not a programmer. If I come and sit in your tech company, I'll find something to do. Sure, somebody has to mind the figures. But I'll always be there because of you." The wife who was given a desk. She shook her head. "I sat in a one-room behind a welder's shop for 4 years, and the only thing that kept me a person was that whatever I had earned. I don't want to lose that just because you came back rich." He looked at her for a long moment, and then a slow, real smile spread across his face, the first fully unguarded one she had seen since 1408. "What do you want to do?" "Something of my own. A real business. You run your tech thing, I run mine, separate. 2 different things standing on 2 different legs, so that if one ever falls, the family doesn't fall with it. And we build others, slowly, over years." She lifted her chin a little, daring him to find it foolish. "That's how real wealth lasts, isn't it? Not one big lucky thing. Many smaller things built carefully, over a long time." Emeka started to laugh, and then he stopped himself, because it would have been easy for her to mistake it, and he never again wanted her to mistake anything he felt. "You know what I love about you," he said. "I've loved it since Enugu, and I'll love it when we're old. You have never once in your life waited for somebody to hand you a future. You sold the only thing your mother left you to buy mine. And now I'm sitting here a wealthy man, offering you the whole world on a plate, and you're telling me you'd rather earn your own." He took her hand. "That, Ada, is the smartest business decision anyone has said to me in years. Yes. 1,000 times yes, build your thing. I'll back it like any other investor on terms, properly, and then I'll get out of your way and watch you run it better than I would. Her face broke open into a smile. So you like it? I love it. Then his face did something strange, went serious and a little nervous, and he glanced over her shoulder toward the kitchen, and his eyes went wide. Ada, what is that by the kitchen door? She spun around, heart lurching. What? What is? When she turned back, he was on one knee. In his hand, held between his thumb and finger, catching the lamplight, was a ring, not the silver band from under the mango tree. This one was gold, and at its center sat a diamond that threw small fires across the ceiling. But she barely saw the stone. She was looking at his face, and at the silver ring, the old one, the cheap one, which he had taken out of his other pocket and set on the floor beside his knee, where she could see it. I proposed to you once, he said, with a ring I could barely afford, under a mango tree, with nothing to my name but a promise. And I kept the promise, even when I had lost you, even when I didn't know if you were alive. I carried that silver ring in every jacket I have owned for 4 years. He set the gold one beside it, 2 rings side by side on his open palm now, the cheap one and the dear one. I'm not replacing the first ring. I'm keeping it forever, because the man who bought it had nothing and loved you anyway, and that man is the best thing I ever was. But I'm allowed now to give you the wedding I promised. So I'm asking you again, on a different knee, in a different life. Adeyes Okonkwo, after everything the world did to keep us apart, will you marry me? She was crying too hard to speak for a moment. When the words came, they came in a whisper. You frightened me about the kitchen, she said. He laughed, wet-eyed. I'm sorry. I needed you to turn around. Yes, she said. It was always yes. It was yes under the mango tree, and it was yes every single day of those 4 years, even when I thought you were gone. Yes. He slid the gold ring onto her finger above the place the silver one had once sat, and she pulled him up off his knee and into her arms, and they held each other in the big quiet house, the way they had held each other at the airport, except that this time nobody was walking backward through any gate. This time, the walking was done. In the weeks that followed, Daisy did exactly what she had said she would do, and she did it the way she did everything, carefully, and on her own 2 feet. She started a cleaning and facilities company. There was a kind of poetry in it that was not lost on either of them. The woman who had been treated like dirt for holding a mop, building a business out of the thing they had used to make her small. But she did not build it the way the Grand Cordova had been run. She built it the way it should have been run. She paid her people a living wage, a real one, the kind you could raise a child on. She gave them uniforms they were proud to wear, and contracts they could read, and a number they could call if anybody, ever, treated them like they were invisible. Her first 3 employees were a younger cleaner named Blessing, who cried when Adeyes found her and offered her the job, and then offered to pay for the evening classes she'd been saving a dress fund toward, and 2 other women from the Grand Cordova, who had stood in that banqueting hall and applauded with tears on their faces. Daisy paid them more than they had ever earned in their lives, and the first time one of them tried to thank her, weeping, calling her madam, calling her their savior, Daisy took the woman's hands and said the truest thing she knew. Don't call me madam, and don't thank me like I lifted you out of the gutter. She held the woman's eyes. Nobody lifted you. You were never in any gutter. The work you do is honest, and it is hard, and the only thing that was ever wrong was the way they paid you and the way they spoke to you. I'm not doing you a favor. I'm doing you justice. There's a difference, and I need you to feel it, because the day you start to feel like a favor, that's the day somebody starts treating you like Ngozi treated me. Within a year, the company had 40 staff. Within 2, it had 170, and a contract to clean a string of office towers on the island, and Adeyes ran it from a small bright office with her mother's gold chain around her neck. And she answered her own phone, and she never once forgot a single name. Emeka built his thing, and she built hers, and the 2 of them grew, slowly and carefully, in 2 different directions, exactly as she had said they should, so that the family would always stand on more than one leg. And when, years later, a business magazine wanted to do a profile and asked her the question they always ask, the secret of your success question, she gave them an answer they did not expect. My success, she said, was a man keeping a promise and 487,000 naira and a gold chain I sold and got back. But if you want the real secret, the one I'd teach a child, it's this. The way a person treats the people who can do nothing for them, the cleaner, the waiter, the security man at the gate, that is the only true measure of who they are. Everything else is just the bank account. I learned that from the woman who treated me worst, and from the man who treated me best, and they taught me the exact same lesson from opposite ends. They were married 4 months later, after the doctors said her heart could take the joy of it. It was a large wedding, because Emeka had a great deal of money and a great many years of an unkept promise to make up for. But it was not, in the end, the money you remembered about that day. What you remembered was the guest list, because among the senators and the tech people and the men in expensive agbada, seated in good seats near the front, were 40-odd men and women in their best clothes who had once worn the uniforms of the Grand Cordova. The cleaners, the porters, the waiters. Adeze had insisted on it, and Emeka had not needed convincing. Dr. Ifeoma was there too, in the second row, dabbing her eyes and pretending she had something in them. And Tochi was there, of course. Tochi, who had carried the letter that never arrived, and who had spent 4 years not quite forgiving himself, and who had, in the end, been the one to track down a market dealer in Enugu and buy back, after a long and patient search, a thin old gold chain that a woman had sold for 175,000 naira to send a man to England. It hung now around Adese's neck above her wedding dress, her mother's chain. Come home. She had cried for a full hour when Tochi gave it to her. It was the only wedding gift she wept over. When the pastor asked who gave this woman to be married, an old aunt stood, because Adeze had no father living. But Adeze, before the aunt could speak, lifted her hand and touched the gold chain at her throat, and looked up and said, quietly enough that only the front rows heard it, "My mother does." And in the silence after she said it, you could have heard a pin drop into a glass of water. A quick word before I let you go, because I think the story we just told carries something real underneath the wedding and the rings. The cruelty Adeze swallowed every morning, being told that a uniform makes you nobody, being written up for things she did not do, being treated as less than human by someone with a little power over her, that part is not invention. It happens in real workplaces, to real people, more often than any of us would like to believe, and it almost always happens to the ones least able to fight back. Now, the protections workers have are different depending on where you live, and a billionaire fiancé is not a labor rights strategy any of us can count on. So if you or someone you love is being humiliated or exploited where you work, please don't look for the answer in a comment section under a video. In the United States, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, exists for exactly this. And so do local legal aid clinics. And they are real, and they can actually help. And if the weight of it has started to press on your mind the way it pressed on Adese's heart, the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is there, any hour, for free. I am not a lawyer and I am not a counselor, and nothing in this story is professional advice. I am only someone who wanted to tell you a story about a woman the world tried to make invisible. So let me leave you with the one thing she proved. Your worth was never the uniform they put you in, and it was never the bank account you didn't have. It was always, only, the kind of person you chose to be when nobody powerful was watching.